welcome back to Explaining Everything, the channel where we dive into the stories and mysteries behind everyday things. Today's question comes from one of our curious viewers, Slime Queen 207. Thanks for the question, Slime Queen. You asked, where do food dyes come from? While the flavor of blue raspberry is a whole separate identity crisis, that glowing blue color you see, that's thanks to the wild world of food dyes. Seriously, have you ever looked at a bright red sports drink and thought, yep, this is definitely something that occurs in nature? No? Exactly. So where do those eye-popping colors come from? Well, buckle up, because the truth is more colorful and weirder than you might expect. Let's dive in right here on Explaining Everything. Humans have been dyeing their food for a long time. Ancient Romans used wine to make meat look redder. Medieval bakers used flowers to tint their pastries. And in the 1800s, people were literally putting lead and mercury into candy to give it a nice shimmer. You know, for that cute but possibly fatal aesthetic. By the late 1800s, science had entered its villain origin story arc. Chemists discovered coal tar, a black goopy byproduct of turning coal into gas, and someone who we can only assume had zero concern for vibes or health figured out you could extract vibrant colors from this stuff, and thus the first synthetic food dyes were born. From coal tar. Yes, the thing you pave roads with. Suddenly, food could be rainbow-colored. Jellies, candies, sodas, everything looked like it had been designed by a unicorn with a marketing degree. And no one questioned the part where it came from coal. Let's be clear, no one's pouring coal tar directly into your cereal. But many synthetic dyes were originally derived from coal tar compounds, which is how we ended up with names like FD and C red number 40 and blue number 1. FD and C, by the way, stands for food, drug, and cosmetic, because nothing says delicious like also being FDA approved for lipstick. These dyes are now mostly made from petroleum, not coal tar, so progress, I guess? Petroleum, you know, oil. The stuff you put in your car is also where your green gummy bears get their glow. That lime flavor hits different when you realize it's basically a highlighter powered by fossil fuels. Now, not all food dyes are synthetic. Some come from natural sources, which sounds wholesome until you find out what those sources actually are. Take carmine, for example. It's a brilliant red dye used in yogurts, juices, and those trendy fruit bars that try very hard to look healthy. Carmine comes from crushed insects, specifically the cochineal bug, which lives on cacti in South America. These bugs are harvested, boiled, and ground up to make a stunning crimson dye. So yes, if you've ever eaten pink yogurt and thought, strawberry, it might have actually been bug smoothie. It's not harmful, it's totally FDA approved, and it's been used for centuries. But maybe don't Google images of cochineal insects while eating. There's also annatto, a yellow-orange dye made from the seeds of the achiote tree. This one's natural and plant-based, so it sounds a bit less like something you'd find in a hardware store. It's often used to color cheese, giving that iconic cheddar orange hue that screams processed in the best way. And let's not forget beet juice, turmeric, and spirulina, all natural, all colorful, and all used in your favorite bougie smoothie bars. But here's the catch. Natural dyes don't always behave. They're sensitive to light, heat, pH, basically everything except polite conversation. That's why synthetic dyes are still kings of consistency. That cherry lollipop? Probably got its red from Red 40, a synthetic dye made from petroleum. Your favorite orange soda? Most likely Yellow 6, possibly mixed with Red 40 to make that iconic artificial tangerine vibe. The blue in your cotton candy? That's Blue One, which sounds more like a Star Wars droid than something edible. And remember, it's not necessarily bad. These dyes are tested, regulated, and generally safe to consume in normal amounts. But when you really think about it, bugs, oil, coal tar history, it kind of makes the food coloring aisle feel like a museum of weird chemical ambition. You might be wondering, wait, can they just put anything in our food as long as it's colorful? Fortunately, no. In most countries, food dyes are tightly regulated. The FDA in the US has approved just 9 synthetic dyes for food use. Europe tends to be stricter, sometimes slapping warning labels on products with certain dyes, like they're parenting toddlers. May cause hyperactivity. Proceed with caution. In recent years, there's been more push toward natural coloring, not necessarily because bugs are more appealing than oil, but because people like the idea of things being natural. Even if it means your naturally colored gummies melt into a sad brown puddle if left in the sun too long. So, where do food dyes come from? Sometimes bugs, sometimes oil, sometimes seeds, and sometimes scientific fever dreams from the 19th century. They're in your candy, your cereal, your yogurt, and probably your tongue right now. And whether they're natural or synthetic, they're all there to trick your brain into thinking, this looks delicious. Next time you unwrap a brightly colored treat, give a little nod to the scientists, insects, and petrochemicals that made it possible, preferably after you swallow. If you learned something new about the brightly colored food you eat, maybe give this video a like, subscribe, and maybe read the label before you lick the popsicle. And hey, if you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. Thank you for tuning in, and join us next time here in the channel that answers all the why, what, who, where, and how questions you've always wondered about, here on Explaining Everything.